Brutal bikers harass a veteran at a truck stop. What happens next leaves them begging. The sun-beaten asphalt of the remote desert oasis truck stop shimmered under the unrelenting Nevada heat. For the weary truckers seeking respite, it was a welcome sight, but for Randy, Steele, Harper and his gang of ruthless bikers, it was a hunting ground. They rolled in like a thunderstorm, their Harleys growling, chains rattling against worn leather. Steele surveyed the scene with cold, predatory eyes. He spotted his prey, an elderly trucker struggling to fuel his rig. Frank Callahan wiped the sweat from his weathered brow. At 70, his body wasn't what it used to be, but his spirit remained unbreakable. He'd survived war, loss, and miles of unforgiving road. A bunch of punk bikers wasn't about to intimidate him. Steele sauntered over, his men flanking him like a pack of wolves. "Hey, old-timer. Need some help there? Looks like you're struggling." Frank ignored him, focusing on the task at hand. But Steele wasn't one to be ignored. He grabbed Frank's shoulder, spinning him around. "I'm talking to you, Grandpa." Frank looked at him evenly. "I heard you just fine, son. I don't want any trouble." Steele laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "Trouble? Oh, we ain't here for trouble, old man. We're here for some fun. And you're gonna provide the entertainment." He shoved Frank hard, sending him stumbling back against his truck. Frank caught himself, his jaw tightening. Around them, the other patrons of the truck stop watched warily, too afraid to intervene. Steele cracked his knuckles, grinning. "Now, let's see what you're made of, Grandpa. Let's see if you can dance." Frank steadied himself against his truck, his heart pounding in his chest. He'd faced down enemy soldiers, survived firefights and ambushes, but this was different. This was a truck stop in the middle of nowhere, and these were just a bunch of punk kids looking for trouble. Steele circled him like a shark, his eyes glinting with malice. His gang jeered and laughed, their voices cruel and mocking. Frank knew he couldn't take them all on, not at his age, not with his bad knee. But he wasn't about to let them see his fear. "Listen, son," he said, his voice calm and steady. "I don't want to fight you. I'm just here to fuel up and be on my way. Let's just go our separate ways, okay?" Steele barked out a laugh. "Go our separate ways? I don't think so, old man. See, we run this place. And anyone who comes through here has to pay the toll." He grabbed Frank's jacket, yanking him forward. Frank stumbled, his bad knee nearly giving out. Steele shoved him again, harder this time, sending him crashing to the ground. Frank lay there for a moment, the breath knocked out of him. He could hear the bikers laughing, could feel their eyes on him, watching, waiting for him to cry or beg. But Frank Callahan was not a man who begged. He pushed himself up slowly, wincing at the pain in his knee. He dusted off his jacket, the faded patches and metals glinting in the sunlight. And then he looked up at Steele, his eyes hard and cold. "Son," he said softly, "you have no idea who you're messing with." Steele sneered, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. He looked at Frank's jacket, at the patches and metals, and something like recognition dawned on his face. Steele's eyes narrowed as he studied the patches on Frank's jacket. Well, he drawled. "Looks like we got ourselves a genuine war hero here, boys." His gang circled closer, their laughter turning to sneers. "War hero," one of them scoffed. "More like a washed-up old man." Frank stood tall, his shoulders squared. "I served my country with honor," he said quietly. "Something I doubt any of you would understand." Steele's face twisted in anger. He lunged forward, grabbing Frank's jacket. "You think you're better than us, old man? You think those patches make you tough?" With a vicious yank, he tore the jacket, the patches, and metals scattering to the ground. Frank's eyes widened in shock, then narrowed in fury. "Those were earned with blood and sacrifice," he growled. "Something your kind will never know." Steele laughed harshly. "Blood and sacrifice? Give me a break. You're nothing but a worn-out old fossil." He raised his fist, ready to strike. But before he could swing, a voice rang out across the truck stop. "I wouldn't do that if I were you." Steele turned, his eyes landing on a tall, broad-shouldered man. The stranger wore a leather vest adorned with patches, military patches, just like Frank's. "This man is a hero," the stranger said, his voice calm but firm. "He's saved more lives than you can count. And he's not alone." One by one, other men and women began to step forward, truckers, veterans, even a former cop. They stood alongside Frank, their eyes hard, their stances ready. Steele's gang shifted uneasily, their bravado faltering in the face of this united front. Steele himself looked uncertain, his fist lowering slowly. Frank stepped forward, his torn jacket hanging from his shoulders. "This is your one chance to walk away," he said softly. "I suggest you take it." Steele's eyes darted from Frank to the growing crowd of supporters. His gang looked to him for guidance, their earlier swagger replaced by a palpable unease. The air was thick with tension, the silence broken only by the distant rumble of engines. Frank's allies closed ranks around him, a wall of determination and righteous anger. Among them, the former cop stepped forward, his badge glinting on his chest. "Son," he said, his voice carrying the weight of authority, "I suggest you listen to the man. Walk away now, and we can all forget this ever happened." Steele's jaw clenched, his pride warring with his survival instinct. He'd never backed down from a fight, never shown weakness. But this was different. This wasn't just some old trucker. This was a man with a past, a man with friends, a man not to be underestimated. Slowly, Steele uncurled his fist. "Fine," he spat. "We'll go. But this isn't over, old man. You haven't seen the last of us." Frank met his gaze unflinchingly. "I've faced far worse than you, son. And I'm still standing. Remember that." With a final sneer, Steele motioned to his gang. They backed away, their eyes never leaving the crowd of supporters. As they mounted their bikes, the roar of engines shattered the silence. Frank watched them go, his shoulders sagging with a mix of relief and exhaustion. The stranger who had first spoken up laid a hand on his shoulder. "You okay, Frank?" Frank nodded, a small smile tugging at his lips. "I am now. Thanks to all of you." As the crowd dispersed, Frank bent to pick up his torn jacket and scattered medals. The former cop helped him, carefully dusting off each one. "You know," he said, "that was a damn brave thing you did. Standing up to those punks." Frank shrugged, his eyes distant. "I've faced worse. We all have, in our own ways." In the days that followed, word of Frank's stand against the bikers spread like wildfire through the tight-knit trucker community. At every stop, every diner, every rest area, Frank was greeted with nods of respect, friendly claps on the back, and offers to buy him a meal or a drink. It was a welcome change for the solitary man, who had grown accustomed to the lonely life of the road. He'd always kept to himself, never one to seek out attention or accolades. But now, he found himself drawn into conversations, swapping stories with fellow veterans and listening to the tales of the truckers. Among his new friends was Sarah, a young woman who had recently inherited her father's trucking business. She was smart, tough, and determined to succeed in a male-dominated industry. She'd heard about Frank's bravery and sought him out, eager to learn from his experience. "How do you do it?" she asked him one evening over coffee. "How do you stay strong in the face of adversity?" Frank stirred his coffee thoughtfully. "It's not about being fearless," he said. "It's about doing what needs to be done, even when you're afraid. It's about standing up for what's right, no matter the cost." Sarah nodded, her eyes shining with admiration. "I want to be like that," she said softly. "I want to make my dad proud." Frank smiled, reaching out to pat her hand. "You will, Sarah. You've got the heart of a true trucker. Never forget that." As the miles rolled by, Frank found himself looking forward to each stop, each chance to connect with his new friends. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Steele and his gang were still out there, no doubt plotting their revenge. But for the first time in years, Frank didn't feel alone. He had a community, a family, and a renewed sense of purpose. Weeks turned into months, and life at the desert oasis truck stop settled into a new normal. Frank, now a regular fixture, took it upon himself to look out for the younger truckers, offering advice and support whenever he could. One sweltering afternoon, as Frank was helping Sarah with a particularly stubborn engine problem, a familiar roar filled the air. Steele and his gang, absent since their humiliating defeat, rolled into the truck stop, their faces twisted with anger. Frank straightened up, wiping his greasy hands on a rag. Sarah stood beside him, her eyes wide with fear. "Frank," she whispered, "what do we do?" Frank's jaw tightened. "We stand our ground," he said firmly. "We don't let them intimidate us." As the bikers dismounted, Steele strode towards Frank, his eyes blazing with fury. "You think you can humiliate me and get away with it, old man?" he snarled. "You think your little trucker friends can protect you?" Frank met his gaze calmly. "I think," he said softly, "that you're a coward who preys on the weak. And I think it's time someone taught you a lesson." Steele laughed harshly. "Oh, you're going to teach me a lesson? You and what army?" As if on cue, the truck stop came alive. Truckers, veterans, and locals alike emerged from every corner, forming a solid wall behind Frank. Some held wrenches, others tire irons, but all had the same look of determination on their faces. Steele's smirk faltered as he took in the crowd. His gang shifted uneasily, their earlier bravado evaporating in the face of such unified opposition. Frank stepped forward, his voice ringing out clear and strong. "This is our home," he said. "And we won't let you or anyone else terrorize us. Not anymore." For a long moment, Steele held Frank's gaze, a silent battle of wills. Then, with a final sneer, he turned away. "Let's go," he muttered to his gang. "This place ain't worth our time." As the sound of the bikers' engines faded into the distance, a cheer went up from the assembled crowd. Frank found himself engulfed in a sea of hugs, handshakes, and backslaps, his newfound family celebrating their victory. But even as he basked in the warmth of their support, Frank knew that the battle was far from over. Steele and his gang might have retreated for now, but they wouldn't stay away forever. Sooner or later, they'd be back, looking for revenge. In the days that followed, Frank found himself in deep discussion with the other leaders of the community, Sarah, the former cop, and a grizzled old trucker named Bill. They knew they needed to be prepared for the bikers' return, but they also knew that they couldn't live in fear forever. "We need to send a message," Bill said, his eyes hard. "We need to show them that we're not going to be pushed around anymore." Sarah nodded, her face thoughtful. "But we can't stoop to their level," she said. "We can't become the very thing we're fighting against." Frank listened to their ideas, his mind working through the possibilities. And then, like a bolt of lightning, it hit him. "We need to build something," he said softly. "Something that shows the world who we are and what we stand for." The others looked at him, curiosity and excitement mingling in their eyes. "What did you have in mind?" Sarah asked. Frank smiled, the plan already taking shape in his mind. "A garden," he said. "A community garden, right here at the truck stop. We'll plant seeds, nurture them, watch them grow. And as they do, we'll grow too, stronger, more united, more resilient." There was a moment of silence as the others considered his words. Then, one by one, they began to nod. "A garden," Bill repeated, a slow smile spreading across his face. "I like it. I like it a lot." The idea of the community garden spread like wildfire through the desert oasis truck stop. Truckers, veterans, and locals alike volunteered their time, their resources, and their expertise. Some brought seeds, others tools, and still others simply offered their sweat and toil. Frank found himself at the center of it all, directing the efforts with a calm assurance that belied his years. He showed the younger volunteers how to till the soil, how to plant the seeds, and how to nurture the delicate seedlings. As the days passed, the barren patch of land behind the truck stop began to transform. Neat rows of vegetables and flowers sprang up, their colors bright against the dusty earth. A sense of pride and purpose infused the community, binding them together in a way that nothing else had before. Even Sarah, who had always been more comfortable with engines than with dirt, found herself drawn into the project. She worked side by side with Frank, learning the secrets of the soil, and marveling at the tiny miracles that unfolded before her eyes. But not everyone was happy with the changes at the desert oasis. Steele and his gang, licking their wounds and plotting their revenge, saw the garden as a symbol of everything they despised: community, growth, and hope. Late one night, as the truck stop slumbered, they crept in like thieves, intent on destroying the fragile new life that had taken root. But as they approached the garden, they found themselves face to face with Frank, Sarah, and a dozen other volunteers, armed with nothing more than garden tools and a fierce determination. "You're not welcome here," Frank said softly, his voice carrying in the still night air. "This is our place, our home, and we won't let you destroy it." For a long moment, the two groups stared each other down, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Then, with a snarl of frustration, Steele turned away. As the sun rose over the desert oasis truck stop, it illuminated a scene of quiet triumph. The community garden, untouched by the bikers' malice, bloomed with renewed vigor, a testament to the resilience and unity of those who had created it. Frank, surveying the lush growth with a contented smile, knew that the garden was more than just a patch of vegetables and flowers. It was a symbol of hope, a reminder that even in the harshest of environments, life could flourish with enough care and dedication. As he walked among the rows, he was joined by Sarah, her face flushed with excitement. "Frank, look," she exclaimed, pointing to a particularly robust tomato plant. "The first fruits are starting to appear." Frank knelt down, gently cradling one of the small green tomatoes in his weathered hand. "It's a miracle, isn't it?" he murmured. "From such tiny seeds, such abundance can grow." Sarah nodded, her eyes shining. "It's like us," she said softly. "From such small beginnings, such strength can emerge." As the word of the garden's triumph spread, it brought new visitors to the truck stop, not just truckers and travelers, but farmers, gardeners, and people from all walks of life, drawn by the promise of something green and growing in the middle of the desert. They came to share their knowledge, to learn from Frank and the others, and to be a part of something bigger than themselves. Slowly, the desert oasis began to transform, not just physically, but spiritually. The once isolated truck stop became a hub of community and connection, a place where people could come together and find common ground. Even Steele and his gang, faced with the overwhelming force of the community's unity, began to lose their grip on the area. They still lurked on the fringes, still threatened and postured, but their power was waning in the face of something far stronger. Frank, watching it all unfold, knew that the battle was far from over. There would be more challenges ahead, more obstacles to overcome. But he also knew that they had something now that they hadn't had before, a sense of purpose, a sense of belonging, and a sense of hope. And as he looked out over the thriving garden, the verdant symbol of all they had achieved, he knew that whatever the future held, they would face it together. As the summer waned, the garden flourished, and with it, so did the spirit of the desert oasis. The truck stop had become more than just a place to refuel and rest. It was a sanctuary, a haven for those seeking respite from the harsh realities of the road. Frank, now the de facto leader of this oasis, found himself increasingly in demand. Truckers sought his advice on everything from engine troubles to personal problems, while locals looked to him for guidance on matters of community and cooperation. It was a role he had never sought, but one he found himself growing into with each passing day. And with Sarah and the others by his side, he knew that he was not alone in this journey. But even as the community thrived, the specter of Steele and his gang loomed on the horizon. They had been quiet in recent weeks, but Frank knew better than to let his guard down. He had seen the darkness in Steele's eyes, the hunger for power and control, and he knew that it would not be satisfied until the desert oasis was under his thumb. So Frank and the others prepared, not with weapons or violence, but with the tools of community and resilience. They fortified the garden, strengthened their bonds, and reached out to other truck stops and communities, building a network of support and solidarity. And when the day came, when Steele and his gang roared into the desert oasis with engines revving and chains rattling, they found themselves facing not just Frank and a handful of truckers, but an entire community united in defense of their home. It was a standoff for the ages, a clash of wills and ideals, but in the end, there could be only one victor. And as the sun set over the desert that day, it was the community that stood tall, their garden and their spirit unbroken, their future bright with promise and hope. The confrontation with Steele and his gang marked a turning point for the desert oasis. With their would-be oppressors vanquished, the community found itself at a crossroads, facing questions of identity and purpose that went beyond mere survival. For Frank, the answer was clear. The desert oasis had become more than just a truck stop, it was a beacon of hope in a world that often seemed devoid of it. And if they were to truly fulfill that promise, they needed to think bigger, to reach beyond their own borders and touch the lives of others. It was a daunting prospect, but one that the community embraced with characteristic determination. Under Frank and Sarah's leadership, they began to expand their efforts, reaching out to other truck stops, other communities, other pockets of forgotten and neglected humanity. They shared their knowledge, their resources, and their spirit, planting the seeds of hope and resilience wherever they went. And as those seeds took root and began to grow, they found themselves part of a larger movement, a network of communities united in the belief that a better world was possible. It wasn't always easy. There were setbacks and challenges, moments of doubt and despair. But through it all, Frank and the others held fast to their vision, to the idea that even the smallest acts of kindness and compassion could make a difference. And as the desert oasis continued to thrive, as its garden bloomed and its people prospered, they knew that they were living proof of that idea. They had taken the barren soil of the desert and transformed it into something green and growing, a testament to the power of community and the indomitable human spirit. So they pressed on, day by day, seed by seed, knowing that the road ahead would be long and hard, but that the destination, a world of hope and possibility, was worth every step. As the desert oasis and its network of communities continued to grow and thrive, Frank found himself increasingly in the role of mentor and guide. He had lived a life full of hardship and struggle, but also one of profound learning and growth, and he felt a deep sense of responsibility to share that wisdom with others. He spent long hours in the garden, working side by side with the younger members of the community, teaching them the secrets of the soil and the rhythms of the seasons. He shared stories of his time in the military, the lessons he had learned about courage and sacrifice, and the importance of standing up for what was right. And he listened, too, to the stories of others, the truckers and travelers who passed through the desert oasis, the locals who had made it their home, and the members of the other communities that had joined their cause. He learned of their struggles and their triumphs, their hopes and their fears, and he found himself humbled by the depth of their resilience and humanity. Through it all, Sarah was a constant presence by his side, a partner and a friend, a source of strength and inspiration. Together, they navigated the challenges of leadership and community building, learning and growing with each passing day. And as the desert oasis continued to flourish, as its gardens expanded and its people thrived, Frank began to see the true power of what they had created. It wasn't just about survival, about making it through another day or another season. It was about something deeper, something more profound, the idea that even in the darkest of times, hope could take root and grow. So he tended that hope, nurtured it with every act of kindness and compassion, every lesson taught and story shared. And he watched as it spread beyond the confines of the desert oasis, touching lives and transforming communities in ways he had never dared to imagine. As the years passed, the desert oasis became a legend, a symbol of hope and resilience in a world that often seemed short on both. Its story spread far and wide, carried by the truckers and travelers who had found solace within its walls, and by the members of the communities that had joined its cause. Frank, now an old man, watched it all with a sense of quiet pride and wonder. He had set out to create a garden, a small oasis of green in the midst of the desert, but he had ended up nurturing something far greater, a movement of the human spirit, a testament to the power of community and compassion. He knew that his time was growing short, that soon he would have to pass the torch to the next generation. But he also knew that the desert oasis was in good hands, that Sarah and the others would carry on the work that he had begun. And so, on a warm summer evening, as the sun dipped low over the horizon and the shadows lengthened across the garden, Frank gathered the community together one last time. He looked out at the faces before him, the truckers and the veterans, the locals and the travelers, the young and the old, and he felt a swell of love and gratitude that brought tears to his eyes. "My friends," he said, his voice cracking with emotion, "I have lived a long life, and I have seen many things. But nothing has given me greater joy or purpose than being a part of this community, than watching it grow and thrive and spread its message of hope to the world." He paused, taking a moment to compose himself. "I know that I will not be with you much longer. But I also know that the spirit of the desert oasis will endure, that the seeds we have planted will continue to grow and flourish long after I am gone." He looked at Sarah, at the next generation of leaders, and he smiled. "The future is in your hands now. Tend it well, and never forget the power of what we have created here." The news of Frank's passing spread quickly, carried on a wave of grief and gratitude that washed over the desert oasis and beyond. Truckers and travelers, veterans and locals, members of communities far and wide, they all came to pay their respects, to honor the man who had touched so many lives. Sarah, her eyes rimmed with red but her spirit unbroken, stood before the assembled crowd, her voice steady and clear. "Frank taught us many things," she said. "He taught us about courage and compassion, about the power of community and the importance of standing up for what is right." She paused, looking out over the sea of faces. "But most of all, he taught us about hope. He showed us that even in the darkest of times, even in the most barren of places, hope can take root and grow." She gestured to the garden, to the lush greenery that had once been nothing more than a patch of dusty earth. "This is his legacy. This is what he leaves behind. And it is up to us, to all of us, to carry that legacy forward." As the sun set over the desert oasis that evening, as the community gathered around the garden to share stories and memories, to laugh and to cry and to celebrate a life well lived, there was a sense of something shifting, something changing. It was as if Frank's spirit, his unwavering belief in the power of hope and compassion, had taken root in each and every one of them, had become a part of the very fabric of their being. And as they looked to the future, to the challenges and the opportunities that lay ahead, they knew that they would face them together, as a community, as a family. The desert oasis would endure, would continue to grow and thrive and spread its message of hope to the world. And Frank's legacy, the seeds he had planted and nurtured with such care and devotion, would bloom for generations to come.